Hey, this is Michelle, and I had a couple of people ask me about a little journal I made for an art challenge that Tiffany had, and so I thought I would just bring you guys along while I made a quick art journal. So I'm just showing you some of the supplies I used. There is some wax linen thread and needles, and you could also use embroidery thread, but um, my journal that I just showed you broke, so I probably wouldn't use that, or at least double the thread up. Anyhow, so there's just some various papers, vintage papers that I'm using, and I'll go through it more later. And then there was some canvas that I rusted this past summer, and so I just wanted to show you could use something like that. For this project, we're just using duck cloth. I got this at Walmart, and I believe it was like, I want to say $3 a yard. Anyhow, I did kind of find out that when you are using it, if you gesso the front and the back before you cut it, you'll have a lot less fraying. So that's kind of like a little tip that I learned. Of course, as I did this one, there was a little bit of a fray, but I think it's because I didn't get the gesso over far enough. So I'm just taking this old journal and measuring it because I wanted to make one about that size. And the measurements were 9.5 by 5.5, and you'll see that on the screen. So what I did is I just used a piece of watercolor paper just so that I could kind of make sure I had like a straight corner, a straight edge to start with, and then I could use my ruler for the rest. Now I do have a little project in mind that I want to start doing weekly, but I'm not there yet. So what I thought I would do is make this little journal and then start using it to plan regularly until I can get my regular weekly plan completely figured out. But I'm excited about that one. So hopefully it'll get me on a better schedule and I can get a video out at least every week or every other week. Anyhow, so I am using just some, those are actually sewing scissors, not that my sewing skills are deserving of special scissors, but it does cut through material a lot better. I'm sure I'm ruining it with gesso over top of it, but you know, I'm not a great sewer, so I don't really care. So anyhow, I just cut that little teeny piece off and then I'm folding it both ways just to make sure it's fairly even. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. So I had just gotten these Distress Oxide sprays and I wanted to play with them. The color scheme stays, as you could see in the beginning picture, but I was just playing with it. I love the circles that they made, and I just used some rubbing alcohol to spray on it to make the colors move a little bit more. And then I'm just kind of picking up what was left. And then that's just a piece of ledger paper that I didn't want to waste any of the pretty paint with, so I put it on there too. Now I dry that really quick, and then I'm coming back with some Master's Touch paints. And the colors are ocean green and pink and purple red. And then I also use Ceramcoat Sunbright Yellow and Amsterdam Reflex Rose and Lukas White. And just in case you're wondering, the Distressed Oxide colors were Picked Raspberry and Spiced Marmalade. So I'm just kind of going around, and I just want it to be a little more cohesive, a little bit more fluid, and the colors to blend. Currently you can still see like the gessoed canvas, and I wanted to cover that up. So I'm just kind of playing and just kind of putting colors wherever. And I brought some of the yellow in with the white, and I love the Reflex Rose. It's one of my favorites. It looks like I'm a little bit off the screen there, but you get the gist. I'm just finger painting, so it's not like I'm reinventing the wheel there. And if I sound stuffy or clear my throat, I'm sorry, but I live in like the cesspool of pollen and my allergies are horrible, so I'm trying to not sniffle or anything. So I did want to kind of keep, I loved the little circles, and I'm kind of trying to keep that look a little bit, and you'll see I'll come back in a little bit with some pink and make it a little bit more. I'll make it stand out a little bit more right there. But I don't want perfect circles because, well, just because that's just not what I was going for. So I think I'm getting close to having a good base down. And again, you can just use plain canvas or color it, paint it after you're done, or not do anything with it at all. I just thought it would be fun to have a little play while I was making a journal. And so I'm just going to dry this and flip it over. And you also don't have to do this, but I colored the back side too. And the yellow's really bright, so I just kind of wanted to tone it down with a little bit of white. But it's by no means perfect, and so I just wanted to just make it all even in one color. So I'm just going to dry that real quick, and that part is done. I did want to add a couple of marks, and I can't remember what the name of that stencil is, but I will have it written in the description. It's a Tim Holtz. I think it's like dashes or something. But I'm using a stencil brush because I want to have crisp edges and clean lines, and I don't always want that look, and then in that instance I'll use my finger or just a cosmetic sponge. So I'm just making sure it's kind of even on each side. And then that is a what is that? A fine liner bottle that I have golden fluid acrylics in white, and I believe I have them thinned down. I think you have to get it to come out, and I can't remember what I used. I don't know if it was airbrush medium or I'm not sure. But I'm just putting some dots here and there, kind of haphazardly around. And if you don't have one of those, they're cheap and they're the best. They make the best dots. They're easiest to write with as far as having the brightest white. And then I missed a little piece, so I'm covering that up just a little bit. And then that is just a piece of white material. And I'm getting some sprays. I have Heidi Swapp Hot Pink and Peach, DecoArt Shimmer Yellow, and one of my favorites, the BoBunny TuTu. And I just spread them on my desk and add a little bit of water and then kind of drop it into the color here and there, just because I want it to make sure the color gets all over and not just in one spot. And I still haven't replaced my craft mat, but my desk is a mess. It was my neighbor's, and she didn't want it anymore, and she did stained glass on it, so there's cuts in it, but it's like wide, and you can raise and lower it, and it was free, so I don't really care. I even use my desk as a palette sometimes if I don't have something to use. So I'm just taking just like a dishcloth and squeezing out the excess material before I dry it. Or I'm sorry, the excess water and liquid. And then I'm trying to figure out if I want to put the tie on the inside or on the outside. And again, you don't have to have a tie if you don't want. You can use buttons, or you don't have to have anything at all, or you can use like what people have in traveler's notebooks, the just one elastic, whatever you want. But I just took it over and stitched it with some variegated thread that I showed. And my lines are not straight by any means. And that's okay. I kind of like that. But there was a lot of extra thread, so I wanted to take and cut a few of those away. And then the tie is really thick in the center, and I didn't want it to get really bulky. So I'm just using my scissors to cut some of that away. And now comes the fun part, at least I think this is fun, is just taking random papers and kind of tearing them down to the size that you want. And I like the torn edges, especially for a junk journal and just playing. And I'm going to use a lot less pages this time than I did last time, because I like to add a lot of fibers and collage pieces. But you can use, whatever you want. You can even make two signatures if you want. This is just what I chose. And then I'm going to do a pamphlet stitch, but you could always just put it all together and run a couple lines down the sewing machine also if you wanted. And I have done that before too. That's just a coffee stained file folder. And then there was a sheet before it that has some oxide sprays on it and a calendar sheet. And that is, I think I bought an art supply that came from, I want to say Japan. And it's just a customs form. But if you've seen any of my stuff, you know that I like Asian writing and things of that nature. So this is just watercolor paper. And then that is a tag that was dyed with, I believe it was hibiscus flowers. And the funny thing with that is, if you dye material, it's pink. Crazy. But the tags were blue. That's just a piece of vellum that I'm ripping the edges off of. And then that's some piano paper. And it's really thin, but I like the crazy odd papers in there. So I'm just making sure that the pages are kind of where I want them to be, the ones that are smaller and bigger. And then I clip it together. And now I'm going to mark you want 3 holes. And I know it doesn't look like it, but I went back and measured it. It's actually 1 inch from the top, 1 inch from the bottom, and then 2 3/4 inches from the edge to the center. And I actually should have made the dots on the outside, because that would have been much easier. And I should have taken the vellum off and set it over top of over the dots I already made. But I like to make things hard on myself sometimes. And then I'm just folding it in half to make sure it's even. And I am by no means a professional or very good at this. It's a really crude journal, but some people have never made a journal, so this is for you people, not the people that are experts at it, that's for sure. So I'm just using a what is that called? I think that's called a pokey tool. That sounds so weird, doesn't it? I think it's a pokey tool, I think is what it's called, because of course I can't find my awl, but I'm just punching 3 holes in there, and then it's not as thick as like an awl is, so I do struggle a little bit with the needle, but that's okay. So when you do a pamphlet stitch, you want to go from the inside to the outside. Or you can go from the outside to the inside, depending on where you want your knot to be. I wanted mine on the inside, so I went through the inside, and I just poked onto a big heavy free book that I had, so I had something soft to punch into when I made the holes. And then you come back out through the top. So you went down through the center, and you hold the tail with your thumb and try not to stab yourself. And here's where I struggle the most. So you come up through there, and I'm just making sure everything's still even. And then you're going to go through the third hole from the inside to the outside. And then you're just going to go right back from the outside of the book through that same hole, the very first hole in the center. Pull that up through and make sure everything's tight. And then I usually make sure there's one side of the tail on each side of the middle thread. And then you're going to want to cross over one way and then switch tails and cross the other piece the other way. And that will keep your knot together better. And there's our journal. So you can wrap it around and tie it in a bow. Or as it starts to get thick, you can just tie it at the edge. Anyhow, thanks so much for watching. I hope you make a journal, and if I inspired you at all, tag me in it. I'm on Instagram and would love if you followed me there and subscribed here. Thanks so much. Bye.